but I believe this started with negligence in failing to secure our assets in Libya, incompetence in dealing with the attacks in the aftermath, the messed up messages, and then possibly deception in sort of avoiding intelligence that we knew was coming out. Am I wrong?
One of the concerns is that we laid out 13 direct attacks or attempted attacks on Western targets. Who knew, for instance, that our compound in Benghazi, which is really sovereign territory of the United States, was bombed twice in the 6 months leading up to 9/11? That twice the British ambassador, there was an attempted assassination on his life. And by the way, the British compound there in Benghazi is about 1 block away from the United States consulate. So there were a series of events and things that were happening that would lead one to believe that there was already very active terrorist type of activity happening there on the ground against American and Western targets. That should have been part of the equation. These extra security requests should not have been denied. In fact, not only did they deny it, they actually decreased the number of personnel that were on the ground providing security.
Hey, Congressman, it's Buck Sexton here. I wanted to ask you, I've just seen the press reports on this about the status of the FBI investigation. And as of, I believe, today, still, there were at least press reports saying that the FBI had not yet secured the site of this crime. They had not yet actually gotten to the place. Meanwhile, we know that journalists have been there, and we know that before that, we don't know who was necessarily going through the compound after it had been burnt out. What's holding the FBI back here? And I can't imagine that there's not a greater sense of urgency to get to a crime scene before it gets even colder. We're talking about a couple weeks after the fact.
I do not have first direct-hand knowledge, nor have I spoken with somebody who's been on the ground since this attack. I don't know the answer to that question, but based on the press reports, there's obviously a great concern. This was supposedly, according to the State Department, a safe enough area to send our ambassador with limited security, yet we can't even get our FBI team in there weeks after. That begs a lot of questions. Questions that we can't wait for the Blue Ribbon Commission to answer, questions we got to have answered right now.
So, Congressman, I want to follow up on Buck's question about the FBI and ask you if you think that this attack is a criminal matter that should be left to the FBI to investigate, or if this was an act of war and that we need to be considering our military options.
This was clearly terrorist type of activity. Again, attacks on the British ambassador, attacks and killing of 4 Americans. We have not lost an ambassador, I'm told, in decades. It was 1979 on President Carter we had an ambassador killed. Now under President Obama we have an ambassador killed. What bothers me is the response to come out and say, well, this is just a video gone awry. I haven't yet to see any evidence that would suggest or support that it was merely a spontaneous act.
Right. But Congressman, my question is this a criminal act that should be pursued as if these are criminals that should be brought to the United States to be in court? What is justice?
This is a terrorist activity. Well, we need to be able to capture and interrogate the people that were responsible for this, and I hope that we can. We need the intelligence community to draw the ties together to figure out where the funding and planning for this was. And we need to evaluate how this happened to such a degree, as the other 2 bombings should have been explored as well. Remember, there's some belief from some that maybe these attacks were confidence builders that led to the ultimate conclusion of this. It's too early to say, but these are the types of the questions that the committee is insisting that the Department of State and the Obama administration answer.
So here's my question. I'll ask it to all of you because my question is getting repetitive at this point. Certainly we agree with Congressman Chaffetz that the handling of this in the aftermath, that the messages that went out, that Susan Rice on the I don't know how many Sunday shows message is deplorable. But SC, you laid out a compelling case. There's more to this story, and it's the story that occurs before the attack, right? How many ways was this messed up in the months leading up to it? And here's the question that I've repeatedly asked is why? What was wrong? Is it negligence, as you pointed out? What did the administration not see and not put into place, and why?
This bolsters the case for it being negligence. If there were any kind of attacks on this compound before we saw what actually ended up happening on the 9/11 anniversary, they clearly should have taken stronger precautions. This is not a consulate in Europe somewhere. This is a consulate in what is effectively a war zone. There are warring militias wandering the streets there. There are heavy weapons. There are unsecured arms depots. And you're going to tell me that the situation we've read about here is in any way sufficient for security? It absolutely is not. And Amy, to your question, the FBI does have the capability capability, and in the past has been the lead agency on these things. What comes to mind immediately are the bombings of our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. The FBI was lead agency on that, and they handle these things frequently.